Welcome back. All right, so as promised, we are now going to talk about the Carolina Hurricanes. A lot of doom and gloom around Carolina right now, but I mean, yes, I understand the upset over this team losing players. I think they've done a good job of bringing in replacements. Are they at the same level that they were last season? I mean, they lost in the second round last season. This is a team that's had a hard time getting over the hump in the playoffs. So it's really been a matter of getting over that hump in the playoffs. Now, we'll look at the exits, and it's notable that, yes, Brett Pesce leaves, you don't get anything back. You can't blame Tulsky for that. No, Don Waddell exits the organization, and he moves on to Columbus. Now, I think Waddell did an excellent job throughout most of his run in Carolina. I think he just had a tough time. I think there were probably teams calling about Pesce, but maybe they were just lowballing him. Maybe he was in a position where he couldn't trade Pesce at certain periods of time because the team's doing well or Pesce's doing, whatever the reason, right? And you don't want to lose defensive depth. So I understand that might have been a difficult move to make. Teravainen, of course, exits to Chicago. Some very productive seasons for him with Carolina, but Teravainen returns to the organization that drafted him. And so I understand the upset about that too, but what else was Waddell supposed to do? And now for Tulsky, he inherits this team that I do expect lowered expectations. That might be for the best for Carolina. I mean, what lowers expectations better than this jersey? Reverse Retro 2.0, and Carolina says no. We're just going to have a third jersey and just put the year 2019 on it. So at any rate, Nason goes to New Jersey. So the Devils steal two other players. Nason, they turned his career around. And one thing to keep in mind is Carolina's very good at finding value, finding players, getting them on the cheap, and turning them into pretty good players. Nason gets a pretty generous contract to New Jersey, which I think really shows that Carolina did a good job of getting his career on the right track. Not that Nason was a bad player, but they turned him into a really good top nine player. Shea goes to Nashville after what was, I think, a fantastic year for Brady Shea. I do hope he lives up to that contract in Nashville. There's some risk to it, obviously. Shea had, I think, a career year, and when players have career years, they very often can fall back the following season. D'Angelo Ranta, just to headline the other players that have gone to unrestricted free agency. Ranta's not coming back. D'Angelo's not coming back either. So, again, Carolina loses some depth. But I do like the additions. I want to talk about the additions. First, Sean Walker, a defenseman I like a lot. I think that he's not going to be Pesce. He's not going to be Shea. Doesn't really have to be. He just has to go out and play his game. Same with Gostisbehere. Gostisbehere, is good on the offensive side of things. He's going to be on that power play. And so I think this is a pretty solid defense for the Carolina Hurricanes. I didn't even put Ghost into the top four when I was going, all right, top four, we'll just do it this way. But Ghost could absolutely end up in the top four. So if he's on the third pairing, I think that's a pretty solid, decent depth, decent depth on the blue line. Will Carrier, an underrated signing, really, from this signing period. Although it's a long a long signing for him coming out of Vegas. Carrier is a guy who is a great energy forward. He can play on your third or fourth line. I like that addition a lot. Jack Roslovic, coming off of a couple of down years, maybe going to Carolina helps him turn around. Maybe it's the Stefan Nason effect on Roslovic. He's had trouble putting the puck in the net, but he's got some speed, he's got some skill, and in Carolina, maybe Roslovic gets it going. And of course, Riley Stillman, blue liner, depth on the blue line. I just threw him on the board because, D'Angelo leaves, Stillman comes in. Stillman's probably going to be the number 7 guy in Carolina. Now, of course, a lot of the storyline right now around the Carolina Hurricanes involves Marty Necas and whether or not he's going to get traded, when he's getting traded, where he's going to go, and what his cap hit's going to look like because he's a restricted free agent. Jack Drury, Seth Jarvis, also restricted free agents. Highly likely that they both get signed probably relatively quickly. Necas, of course, going to arbitration, and that's really going to put Carolina up against it. After the arbitration award is granted, you've got 7 days to say, yep, we accept that contract or we reject that contract, and then he becomes an unrestricted free agent if they reject it. So, and that's after going through the arbitration process, which can be ugly. So a relationship that's already headed for a very likely divorce soon might be in front of an arbitrator where the team's arguing he wants too much money and the players arguing they're cheap. So it's not a great situation. Now, the cap space for the team, according to Cap Friendly, which is still up, $11,825,000. It's a good amount of cap space until you look at the fact they haven't signed Jarvis, Necas, or Drury. They would eat up most of, or if not all, of that $11.8 million, right? Like, Jarvis, to me, took that next step this past season. The guy looks like he's going to be a star. Which brings me to their top six, and it's a likely top six, right? So Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis, these guys can all score. I still think Aho has a next level to get to offensively. Martinuk likely to end up on the second line. But you got Kuznetsov or Stahl as the second line center. Does it matter? Not necessarily. If Kuznetsov's third line or Stahl's third line, doesn't really matter. And Necas. Necas, of course, being the one that everybody's keeping their focus on. And so that's part of the reason why I haven't started season previews. I'm trying to not be alarmist with these videos over the summer because moves aren't done yet. GMs aren't finished putting these teams together. You don't walk through an art class and when somebody's just started putting paint on the canvas, go, well, you ruined it. It's done. How many times have we watched Bob Ross and gone, that's ruined and it's a forest? How did just a couple? It's a forest. Maybe Tulski can turn this into a nice happy little tree, and suddenly you got a forest. So there you go. The Bob Ross. You didn't think that I was going to mention Bob Ross? There it is. So the top six, I think, is still really good. And I think this is a team that should be pretty good offensively. Do you lose something with Teravainen out of that top six? Yes. Do you lose something with Nason out of the top nine? Sure. But Roslovic being added to the top nine should help. Carrier gives him a little bit of energy and some hitting, which Carolina could use. Your top four, and again, I'm not even including Ghost in the top four. Slavin, Burns, Orlov, who remember signed that big contract last summer. That's one question mark I'd have with Waddell is I don't know that the Orlov signing has aged particularly well. If they don't sign Orlov, odds are they may very well have been able to keep Teravainen or whatever, right? Or Shea, right? And then you've got either Walker or Chatfield. You could put Ghost in the top four. It's still a pretty good blue line. It's not going to wow you a lot on paper, but Slavin is one of the best defensive defensemen in the league. Burns can still play and shoot the puck. I think Chatfield's underrated, and Orlov could very well have a bounce-back season offensively in the absence of Shea, Pesce, D'Angelo. Somebody's going to have to get those minutes, and so it may very well be Orlov who benefits from some of the exits there. And then in goal, and this is where I will grant you there's a question mark. Freddie Anderson's ability to stay healthy is a question mark. I still think in the playoffs he's good enough. Not every single night, obviously, but I still think he's good enough to play in the playoffs. It's just a matter of him staying healthy. But Kochetkov, right? Pyotr Kochetkov is a good young goaltender. I don't think he's reached his peak yet. He could very well end up being the starter this year. It doesn't feel like Carolina's worried. Like, I haven't heard any rumors that Anderson's on his way out, or I haven't heard any rumors that Carolina's looking for John Gibson, something like that. So yeah, Freddie Anderson and Kochetkov likely to be the tandem, and that'll be a question mark going into the season. So I wanted to highlight this era. It starts May 8th of 2018 when Rod Brindamore's named the head coach. And that first year in 2019, they get to the playoffs for the first time since 2009. It's a long time in between playoff appearances. They went 46-29-7, 99 points. They were 16th in goals for and 6th in goals against. They get all the way to the conference final. They get swept by Boston, scored 5 goals in 4 games. One question with Carolina almost every season is, so are they going to run out of goals in the playoffs? And almost every year the answer is yes. 2019-2020, at the time of the pause, they're 38-25-5, 81 points. They were 14th in goals for that season, 6th in goals against. In round 1, they lost against Boston in 5. They scored 11 goals in 5 games. So a little bit above 2 goals a game. Still not where you want it to be in the playoffs, right? 2020, 2021, 36-12-8 record, just playing in their division, of course. 80 points. They were 10th in goal scoring in the NHL that year, 4th in goals against. And in round 2 against Tampa Bay, they lost in 5 games, scored 9 goals. So below 2 goals per game. So again, the offense not there when they needed it in a series where they lost. 2021, 2022, 54, 20-8, 116 points, 9th in goals scoring during the season, 1st in goals against. And in round 2 against the Rangers, they lost in 7. They scored 13 goals. So again, they're below 2 goals per game in a series loss there. 2022-2023, 52-21-9, 113 points. 15th in goals for, second in goals against. They're swept in the conference final by Florida, and they scored 6 goals. So the goal scoring just completely dries up. This season was actually different in that they go 52-23-11, or 52-23-7 for 111 points. 7th in goals for, 4th in goals against. So for all the talk about the goaltending not being good enough, in goals against, they've ranged from 1st through 6th since Rod Brind'Amour took over. So that's excellent defense and tells you if that defense could carry over into the playoffs, they should be able to get to a championship and win one. So in round 2 this year, they lose in 6 against the Rangers, but they scored 19 goals. They allowed 20. So this year, unlike other years, they scored in the playoffs in the series they lost. They couldn't keep the puck out of their net enough. And that's where the criticism comes in for Anderson. I'm not going to pretend Anderson had a good series. He did not have a great series or good series against the New York Rangers. But in general, it's been the goal scoring drying up. So the one question mark that I have with Carolina is that while Brind'Amour has got this team to unprecedented success, they have never had a run like this in their team's history. Even going back to Hartford. Hartford never had a run like this. 3 seasons in a row where they've had a minimum of 111 points. This season, I don't expect this team, like this season coming up, I don't expect them to reach 110 points. Maybe 100. But maybe that's the best thing for them. Because this is a team that has just cruised through the regular season, and then in the playoffs, they failed, right? Conference final, they get swept here. Conference final, they get swept here. They lose in round 2 3 times. They lose in round 1 the other time. So yeah, this is a team that hasn't been able to get over the hump. Maybe changing up the composition of this roster, maybe letting some guys go, maybe lowering expectations. Maybe this is the year Carolina does it. I've mentioned before, the year Carolina won in 2006, they were seen as a team that played in an easy division, and they weren't taken all that seriously going to the playoffs, and they won a Stanley Cup. So maybe this coming season, instead of being first or second and in that fight for the top, maybe they end up being a wild card team, and then in the playoffs, they turn it on. Because sometimes that's how that works. Teams sometimes aren't as good when they're favorites as they are when they're underdogs. And so we'll see what happens with Carolina this coming season. I don't think it should be all doom and gloom with Carolina. I'm anxious to see what happens with Marty Necas, and I think that's where we can then make that decision on how unsuccessful or successful an offseason has been for Carolina. But if you don't win a Stanley Cup in the next couple of years, like this is a team that's built to win and has been very good for a while. Eventually, the rest of the league's going to catch up. So they're going to have to figure out that formula. It's tough to figure out that formula. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below on how you feel Carolina's offseason has gone, maybe compared to expectation, and how you feel about the players that have left, the players they've brought in, that kind of thing, and where you expect them to finish this coming season. Just for fun, because it's July 9th, why not? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.